just record that now. There we go. So yeah, a couple weeks ago we were talking about relationships, and one of the subjects that came up was conflict, and it's something that I'm particularly interested in, not just in the realms of relationships, although relationships, as you know, don't just mean love relationships. They might mean relationships with people in the workplace, or global powers, or whatever. And I just find it absolutely a fascinating topic. And I've had the great opportunity to come in contact with lots and lots of different types of teachings and ways of looking at things. And so I wanted to do a little presentation, as I always do, and then open the floor up to everyone. I think most of you know me. For those of you who don't, I am a coach. I'm a trainer with Peter Sage. I'm currently involved in something called Elite Mentorship Forum, where I'm also a trainer, which is super exciting. I'm a mom. I'm a girlfriend. I'm a human living in North London. Lots of diverse roles. I've also practiced Buddhism for over 30 years. So that's been really helpful in framing some of my narrative. But yeah, I'm fascinated by this topic. So negotiating differences and looking at conflict styles, and maybe even, if we have time, looking at love languages. So I wanted to start this by asking, it's terrible when we fight each other, isn't it? Or is it? Is it terrible? Is fighting in itself terrible? And this is something that I really want to unpack a little bit, because it is through conflict that we grow, but it really depends how conflict is managed. So I would like to propose that learning to disagree agreeably is one of the master skills of life. Sorry, I'm just going to let someone else in again. Welcome, welcome. So, if we start from the premise that diversity in life is essential to our survival, to our creativity, and to our ability to become solution focused, then it seems pretty obvious, doesn't it, that being able to disagree without falling out completely, or finding a way to negotiate differences, or as a great man, Richard Costin, once said, treasure the differences. It's obvious that this is something, it's essential to our survival. So I was reading, there was a book I came across a number of years ago called, a couple of years ago actually, called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. And it really blew my mind, because what he talks about is the reason why so many people fail miserably in world situations, in global politics and things like that, is because sometimes you have a situation where you get into what's called an echo chamber. So you align yourself only with people who agree. And so the whole book is about unpacking that. He starts in the first chapter talking about the CIA and how they were basically educated white middle-class males who all were kind of had the same worldview, and that 9/11, this is just one theory, by the way, could have been anticipated had there been more diversity in the CIA, and how they just thought bin Laden was some cute little guy in a cave somewhere, because how could he do anything? He's just a little guy where, looking kind of disheveled in a cave. And had they had a broader group of people in the CIA, it could have turned out differently. And the book gives numerous examples of that. But anyway, from that book, I read a great quote, which is towards the end of the book, where he's quoting, someone called Heinrich. Don't ask me who that is. Some of you maybe know. And he says, once we understand the importance of collective brains, we begin to see why modern societies vary in their innovativeness. It's not the smartness of individuals, it's the willingness and ability of large numbers of individuals at the knowledge frontier to freely interact, exchange views, disagree, learn from each other, build collaborations, trust strangers, and I underlined this and emboldened it, be wrong. It's okay to be wrong. Innovation does not take a genius or a village. It takes a big network of freely interacting minds. And you can look at this on the macro. Right now, I'm talking about politics and society, but I think you can equally narrow it down to your interpersonal relationships, whether it's a relationship with a partner, or whether it's a relationship with your boss or a friend, or someone you've just met. So, rebel ideas, the power of diverse thinking. And the point is, for me, and this is my personal observation, you are welcome to disagree. We're living in a time when our relationships have become divisive. And I'm here to pose the question of whether that's healthy, either for our personal lives or for our world. The kinds of things like, are you pro-vax or are you anti-vax? Are you Democrat or are you Republican? Are you Black Lives Matter or are you All Lives Matter? The problem, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't affiliate ourselves with a viewpoint. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have a viewpoint. I'm not even suggesting we shouldn't feel strongly about it, but there is a world of difference between respectfully disagreeing and ending friendships because there's a difference of opinion. And one of the most powerful experiences I had of this was with my dad, who died in, gosh, I'm terrible with dates. I think it was 2014, actually. And we had this disagreement. I was a Democrat and he was a Republican. And it was in the time of George W. Bush. And we used to argue about it. And I used to visit him 3 times a year, and we'd get into these really inflamed arguments. Then he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And I realized the futility of having an argument like this. And I remember one day we were sitting in the car, we'd driven somewhere, and there was a very rabid right-wing radio host on there, someone like Rush Limbaugh or some American demagogue who was going on about homosexuality. And it infuriated me so much. I just said, how can you listen to this shit? And I really went off on one. And then I just felt, we got back to the house and everything was really muted and quiet. And I thought, is this really worth it? And I felt so ashamed, actually, that it was that important to me that I wanted to go head to head with my dad, who was dying. So I gave him a hug. We kissed and made up. We really, that sort of became the starting point for discussing really important things like the meaning of life, his death, which he questioned me about, because as a practicing Buddhist, I had some insight to share. And he said to me, well, the only soul I believe in is lemon soul. That was his little joke. And it gave us the opportunity to discuss things, and we became really close. And the last time I saw him, after having a lifetime of disagreement, he said, my beautiful daughter, thank you so much. And that was goodbye, because I lived thousands of miles away. So the reason I raise this is because it doesn't matter that he was a Republican and that I was a Democrat, or that he hated Palestine, or that I had a different, all of this stuff that seemed so important, when faced with the reality of respect for another human being, it really wasn't important. So the other day I was having, I'll give you another funny little anecdote. The other day, I was having a chat with a guy I'm dating. I'll call him my boyfriend just for the sake of calling him my boyfriend. And he suggested to me that a penguin was a fish. And I said, no, it's a bird. And he said, yes, but they spend time in the water. And I said, well, in that case, they are cannibals. And besides, they can't breathe underwater. And he said, okay, they're half and half. And in the spirit of fun and compromise, I happily agreed, because I thought, well, wow, what a great solution. Yeah, okay, so they're half and half. Like, who cares? Who cares? Why is it important what, whether a penguin is a fish or a bird? And I don't need to win the argument. So I want to ask you a question. How willing are you to let go of the need to be right? And how willing are you to accept the viewpoint of another person while maintaining a strong opinion of your own? So in that book I mentioned, Rebel Ideas, if you're new to the call, I'm not on commission, but I am going to promote it. As I say, he talks a lot about these kinds of examples about where people blindly follow a line of thinking, get into what he calls an echo chamber. And you can see it all over Facebook. If you have subscribed to a certain point of view, Facebook is going to deliver you with more of the same, more of the same, more of the same, more of the same, until you're thoroughly brainwashed into keeping your point of view rather than exploring someone else's. If you were to give a different point of view, you'd be fed the same thing over and over again. That's what the algorithms are designed to do. It's not an accident that we're friends on Facebook. So we need to have a range of views so that we can successfully avoid confirmation bias. Additionally, it helps us grow. So it's really important. So another thing he says is, so this is a quote I got from Wally, who's on this call. And it was he showed a movie. Wally may tell you later, he's very involved in a project called Celebrate Life, which brings people together and tries to reduce violence. And you can say more about that later, Wally. I'm not representing it in its fullest, but he showed a movie a few nights which talked about violence and how, again, one of the people who attended said, so much boils down that people want to belong to something, and these things can spiral out of control and have grave consequences. So it's this need to belong often that drives people and can cause grave consequences. So with all that being said, I want to introduce you to a really interesting model that I came across. It's from something called Kelman Diagnostics, and I will confess I haven't studied it in great detail, although I intend to, because I just think it's fascinating. And it talks about the different kinds of conflict and how we probably have a leaning, a propensity to more towards one style than another, and how different conflict styles are useful and different conflict strategies are useful in different contexts. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute, and I'm going to show you this because it's really super interesting. Well, I hope you find it as interesting as I do. So let's just, can you see that? So these are 5 conflict styles, and I'll briefly explain each of them. There's competing, which means when you drive your point home, when you need to win the argument, and there is a place for that. And we'll discuss that in a minute. Then there's collaboration, which is working together to find a solution, right? And both of these fall into the assertiveness part of this grid, as you can see. They're right near the top here. Both of these are where people have the opportunity to assert their opinion. Then right around the middle here, you have, and collaborating, actually, this is assertive, but this is also cooperative. Collaborative is assertive and cooperative. Then you have compromising, which is right smack in the middle, which means that each of you will give ground till you come up with a solution. So that's another conflict style. Is this making sense so far? Give me a thumbs up if it's making sense. Wally, I can see you. Does it make sense? Yes, no, yes? You think so? Okay, because I can't see everyone's face. I can only see your face right now. Then you have avoiding and accommodating. You can see avoiding is right down the bottom of assertiveness. And there are times when it's really appropriate to avoid an argument. And we can come up with some examples of that later on in this discussion. And then we have accommodating, which is really cooperative. I discovered when I took the Kelman Diagnostics test myself that I was way too far on the accommodating side. I might not seem that way because I'm quite assertive when I talk, but way too far that way. And that possibly wasn't serving me because it isn't an appropriate strategy in all situations. So let's talk a little bit about these 5 different conflict styles and how they might be appropriate or inappropriate. So say you've had an argument with your partner or your lover, and you choose the conflict style of avoiding. Now, I wonder how that's going to go in the long run. If you keep avoiding conflict, if there's something that's really bothering you, and just sweep it under the carpet, sweep it under the carpet, sweep it under the carpet. There may be times when you have to do that, but as a long-term strategy, it's probably not going to work because you'll be doing that at the expense of open and honest communication. But avoiding might be a great strategy if someone approaches you with road rage. Do you really think it's necessarily a good idea to go head to head with that person if there's road rage going on? I would suggest not. And sometimes I know that all of us fall prey to that. I certainly do, but it's not necessarily the best strategy. Or what about the conflict style of being accommodating? So your boss asks you to do tasks you don't want to do, but you know that it's an important aspect of your job, so you're accommodating. You go along with it. But then what happens if it goes against your principles? What happens if they're asking you to overextend yourself in that role? Do you continue to be accommodating? For how long? Or do you use the competitive conflict style, which says, no, I'm not doing that. This is the way I'm doing it. So can you see how valuable these are? And I can post the 5 styles in the chat box in a minute. So that's where competing style might come in. Or another example of seeing a friend when you're too tired and you choose accommodating. Is that a healthy choice? Or could you make a compromise in that situation? Could you decide, actually, I'm really sorry, but I'm so tired. You're not going to get the best of me tonight. How about we meet next week? Or how about, could you come over to my house rather than us meeting in town, and we'll have a takeaway? That sort of thing. I haven't pre-thought of an example of collaboration, but collaboration would be something like when you're working on a project together and everybody brings their best ideas to the table. That's collaborating. But there will be times when there has to be a leader, and if there's too much collaborating, nothing will get done because everybody's so busy working out how they're going to work something out that nothing ever gets worked out. So you can see how these 5 conflict styles, which I'm going to write down here, I just think they're brilliant. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to share about that? I've got someone else coming on here who's missed 90% of what we're going to talk about, but never mind. So competing, collaborating, compromise, avoiding, accommodating. I can't remember if it has 1 M or 2. I'm hoping I've got that right. There you go. So those are the styles. Anyone have anything they want to say? We can talk later.
There's just one thing that I wanted to say, actually, which is that while you were talking, hi, Corey, by the way, nice to see you.
Ian, nice to see you.
One thing that occurred to me while I was looking at that diagram and you were talking was that I might be wrong, about this, but I seem to have, on a quite regular basis, one of those for particular people. Like there's one person who I'm always avoiding conflict with. There's another member of my family who I'm accommodating to. There's another one who I'm competing with. Do you know what I mean? And it always works the same way with those same people. And it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, I think I'm accommodating to my son, and I avoid conflict with my wife. And I have a funny thing with my daughter where we kind of compete and we disagree, and I say something probably completely inappropriate, and she gets annoyed with me, and then I kind of try to make light of it, make a joke out of it, and she gets even more annoyed. And this is something that all those three situations are a repeating thing. But I have to say that I think as I'm getting older, I'm much more accommodating.
Right.
I'm much better at it, at dealing with it, I hope.
And I think what's interesting about that is that what you're saying is that accommodating is a virtue, and it is a virtue in some situations, particularly if you haven't characteristically been accommodating. But there are situations where it's absolutely inappropriate. Like with your son, it's great that you're accommodating, but there presumably needs to be a threshold where it would be inappropriate to be accommodating, right? So I think it's really natural that you would choose one style over another with specific people. And I think it's a brilliant example. So thank you for sharing that. But, the real question is do you feel those relationships are healthy? And if they are, then great. But if there's something that you're finding you're not doing or not addressing, so in my situation, and I'm going to be really open about this, I was married to someone for many years who I was way too accommodating with, and eventually I just thought, I can't stand this anymore. It's not his fault. It's not his responsibility that I was so accommodating for so long that I didn't challenge things that truly were bothering me. So it's really super important. Like, when is it right to accommodate? When is it right to avoid? When is it right to compromise? And when is it right to challenge and say, no, that's not acceptable. I'm not willing to make that compromise. And that's the reason to be thinking in this way, is like, is this really serving me? And that's just a question I want to pose, and you don't have to answer it tonight. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and I will talk about it briefly, and because I do think it relates to negotiating differences, is that some of you may have heard of the 5 love languages. And again, this can apply to couples, but it can also apply to friendships. And so I will again name these, and I will put them in the chat box for those of you who aren't familiar with them, because these are places where communication can become unstuck. So they are, as you can see in the chat box, acts of service, which means, you show your love by doing the hoovering or picking someone up from the airport. That's the primary way you demonstrate love. It could be words of praise. Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, you're so kind. Oh, you're so smart. Oh, you're the best husband in the world, blah, blah, blah. It could be gifts, that you're the person who always gives gifts when you've been away. You always bring a gift. When you come to someone's house, you always bring a gift. It could be quality time. You just want to sit there and watch telly together, hold hands, go on a walk together, go out to whatever, go to the theater, blah, 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 spending time together. Or it could be physical touch. And everyone will have a different constellation of those different love languages. And sometimes communication, and I've seen this because I've done work with couples where the one member of the couple absolutely needs the quality time, really needs the quality time, and the other person is maybe more concerned with providing for the family and out at work all the time. And so therefore that becomes like an act of service or a gift. And quality doesn't understand the other person's need for quality time. So these are also areas where it's important to recognize, in the same way as recognizing what your conflict styles are. And I know I'm throwing a lot into the pot here, but this is why it's so important to know where you are in those areas and to be able to recognize that it's possible or even likely that the other person isn't the same as you. You know, some people are not word people. They will never tell you how fabulous you look or how well you did or any of that stuff. And other people, if you're a person who needs that, then there's room for discussion there and for saying, I'm a person who needs this. This is really important to me. So I'm just giving you, I'm just blunderbussing you here with tools and ideas. So that's pretty much it from me this evening. I mean, I think we've actually covered quite a lot of ground between starting with the sort of global idea of the power of diverse thinking and how we're all different, to conflict styles, to the interpersonal, the sort of closest to home level of the individual and love languages. So I want to hear from you guys, any questions you have. Thank you already, Ian, for contributing to this. I'm going to, sorry, but you were recorded, Ian. Let me know if you mind, but I'm going to stop record now because I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. If I can find the stop record button. There we go. I'm going to pause recording.